Hi friends, I'm Joni Tata of the Joni and Friends International Disability Center here in Southern California. And I am so grateful for this chance to share a few words with you at this special conference marking the 40th anniversary of Roe versus Wade, a decision which initially many Americans thought only involved a woman's right to choose. But when the Supreme Court ruled that a woman has the right to end the life of that child that's inside of her, the implications went far beyond her womb. Because once the court dismantled safeguards around the life of the weakest and most vulnerable among us, an unborn child, then the rights of all of us become exposed, especially others who are weak and vulnerable, quadriplegics like me, or the elderly, the mentally ill, people in comas, those with intellectual impairments, and newborns with significant disabilities. The so-called right to privacy, the basis for Roe versus Wade, made the exercise of rights in our country a national competition to see who is more victimized than whose competing claims are the strongest. And when the rights are no longer moral claims, but people's willful determinations dressed up in politically correct language, no one is more exposed than those who are too weak, too small, too old, too uninsured, or too disabled to speak for themselves. Those of us who are disability advocates are watching very closely those states that have physician-assisted suicide laws. Yes, today, states extend aid in dying to those in the last stages of terminal illnesses, but even now, people are challenging what that word, quote, terminal really means, and what the word, quote, illness means. So why not extend physician-assisted suicide to a person severely disabled with multiple sclerosis? At least that's the thinking of many right-to-die advocates. To them, it is a matter of one's privacy rights. Look, I have been in this wheelchair for 45 years. When I was a teenager, I broke my neck in a diving accident, which left me a quadriplegic. Oh, what a fateful dive that was, and my goodness, was I depressed. And I often wonder, looking back, I wonder what loopholes, what caveats that I might have found in those early years of my deep depression, had there been death with dignity laws on the books. But my problem back then was not my quadriplegia, it was my depression, and that was successfully treated. The Roe versus Wade decision also began the slow erosion of the public consensus, which up until that time agreed that life is indeed sacred, that it's worth protecting, worth defending. After all, if one's conscience becomes inured or calloused toward an unborn child, then it's easier to diminish the life value of, let's say, someone who is brain injured and in a coma. I've seen it happen. And so now, 40 years later, no longer does the public consensus unite around the moral premise that all life is precious. Instead, the public sympathizes with the depressed quadriplegic who wants to end his life. Why not remove the life supports from a person in a coma? Why not euthanize the newborn with multiple disabilities? Why not refuse treatment for an elderly person, especially in this day when healthcare dollars are so scarce? From physician-assisted suicide to embryonic stem cell research to infanticide and so much more, the disregard for the sacredness of life, it can all be traced back to Roe versus Wade. It's all about treating people as, well, people. People who have inherent worth and dignity, whether they are quadriplegics like me, or the elderly, the unborn, or the newborn with multiple disabilities. Psalm 82 says, quote, "Defend the cause of the weak, maintain the rights of the poor and oppressed, rescue the weak and needy." That is some command. And people with disabilities need advocates like you who will courageously champion the vulnerable, the elderly, those with handicapping conditions, and the medically fragile. People like you who will redefine rights as moral claims based on absolute values. People who will recognize that we are image bearers of a creator God and therefore have intrinsic worth. So, on behalf of the many Americans with disabilities like me, thank you for explaining to your friends and colleagues just how damaging, just how dangerous Roe versus Wade is. Yes, of course, to the unborn child, but also to others at risk. Just because they're too weak or too old or too disabled, just because they lack a strong voice, be their voice. Thank you for your support for life, because all life is worth living. And I say that as a quadriplegic who deals daily with chronic pain and recently battled stage 3 breast cancer. Life is worth the battle. And that's why your participation in this conference matters. So on behalf of the people God was thinking of in Psalm 82, bless you and thank you for listening.